Welcome to the Let Me Bend Your Ear podcast. My name is Frank. I'm the host of the show. This is a movie podcast where I discuss and review movies new and old. You can get this podcast wherever you listen to your podcast. You can also download episodes of the show on the website. The website is letmebendyourear.com. You can also follow the channel for the show on Facebook. Search for Let Me Bend Your Ear podcast. The YouTube channel, you can follow there as well. Subscribe and you'll get notices when I go live to record new episodes. That is also Let Me Bend Your Ear podcast. The show is also streamed live on the show's Twitter page. The handle is at Bend Your Ear Pod, and also on Twitch. So you can get the show at any one of those platforms. So today I'm going to discuss and review the 2022 film Pinocchio, which is now streaming on Netflix. It played at a brief time in the theaters, but it's now on Netflix. That's where I was able to see it. It is co-directed by Guillermo del Toro and Mark Gustafson. So it's interesting about Pinocchio. Everybody knows the book and the various versions of the film. Actually, there's two versions this year. One that came out earlier this year, a live-action Pinocchio with Tom Hanks. That was directed by Robert Zemeckis. That came out a little earlier this year. And then, of course, this version that I'm going to review tonight. The thing that's interesting before I get into the review itself about Pinocchio is I saw Pinocchio when I was a young child in the 70s. My mother took me to the theater to see it on one of its re-releases, obviously. And in watching this current film, the thing that came to me very clearly, very quickly, is I don't remember jack squat about the Disney version of Pinocchio. I only really remember, obviously, the main story, Geppetto, wooden puppet, nose grows when he lies. And the most memorable thing I remember about the Disney version that I saw in the movies as a young child was the whale sequence. And I actually misremembered it, and I haven't seen the Disney Pinocchio in forever either. I always just remember Pinocchio being in the whale and nothing else. And I really came into this movie, actually, as I started to watch it, really, other than knowing the main characters and kind of what the story was, I didn't really remember a lot of it. So a lot of this was new to me, shockingly, because like I said, I've only seen Pinocchio once, and that was in the theaters, 40 years ago. Actually, longer than that, probably. So let's get into the review. So Pinocchio is a stop action animation film. So stop action you don't really see a lot of anymore. There's been a few examples over the last 10, 15 years. The most popular ones I could think of: Coraline, The Fantastic Mr. Fox, directed by I believe that was that Soderbergh? I think Soderbergh did that film. And not Soderbergh, Wes Anderson. Wes Anderson directed that one. I haven't seen that one. And then, of course, the films of Henry Selick. So back, James and the Giant Peach, Nightmare Before Christmas, and I know there's one he's directing that's coming out actually on Netflix. That's voiced by Key and Peele that he's doing. I don't know the name of it, but that's coming out. I think if it's not already out, it's getting ready to come out. So stop action is something you don't really see anymore. And doing the research for this version of Pinocchio, this has been a passion project for Del Toro for at least a decade, if not longer. He's been trying to get this going since 2013, 2014. And it's been, studios really didn't want to finance it. Is it going to be expensive because of the way they were going to do it? And then finally, Netflix came on board to pick up the film, and then they ultimately were able to get it made. It took over 1,000 artists to create the film. I think it took about 3 years to make. And it shows on the screen. I'll get to that momentarily. So, as the movie Pinocchio opens, and this is one of the things that really kind of threw me as to how much of the story I really didn't know, because I never read the source material. And like I said, my only exposure to Pinocchio is through the Disney version, which I saw a long time ago. The movie opens with Geppetto, the woodmaker, craftsman, and his son, Carlo. And, the movie opens, he's close to his son. They do everything together. At the time the movie begins, he's building, or he's putting together a giant crucifix in the church. This is set, of course, in Italy. And as the film opens, you get the feeling of that close relationship between father and son. and then planes attack the small town that they live in and drop bombs, inadvertently hitting the church that Geppetto was working in, and unfortunately his son is killed. So his son was 10 years old. So as the movie opens, obviously it's a devastating opening, when you have a child die. Now, like I said, when that happened, I didn't, it hit me by surprise, because like I said, I wasn't really familiar with the intricacies of this story. So obviously that's a powerful beginning to the story. So he loses his son, and then of course he spirals into grief over that horrific loss, and takes to drinking. He really stops working and just retreats into the pain of loss and despair. So one night he's drunk, he's just feeling sorry for himself, just wallowing in the sadness, and he makes a wish for his son back, and he proceeds to build a wooden boy. And through some magic that happens, you of course know that part of the story. The wooden boy comes to life, and that is Pinocchio. So Geppetto has Pinocchio now. He's he can't believe this is happening. Of course, he's startled when he first discovers this creation is alive. And the next part of the film goes into his assimilation into the world. What does he do? Does he go to school? What does Geppetto do with this thing? It's not a boy. It's, even though it's talking and alive and doing things like that. And this is where the film is really, really interesting, because the backdrop of Pinocchio in this version of it is World War II Italy and Benito Mussolini. So you wouldn't think on a Pinocchio film that you would get Benito Mussolini. So there's some kind of dark undertones there. The rise of fascism in Italy. There's a character in the film that's one of the soldiers in you would assume the Italian army, that's recruiting very, very young kids to go off to train so they can be ready for war. And this character finds out about Pinocchio and sees him as a indestructible soldier and a value. So there's that pull, and then of course Geppetto doesn't want him to go to war. He wants him to go to school. And you also get another character, Count Volpe, which is voiced by the great actor Christoph Waltz, who runs a carnival and who's in town. The carnival's broke, they're not making any money, and he discovers Pinocchio and gets him to try to join the carnival. So these are kind of three things that are going on with the backdrop of the war. So if you know Guillermo del Toro's work, if you've seen any of his other films, Nightmare Alley, which I reviewed for the podcast last year when it came out, great film noir, throwback film. One of my favorite films of all time, Pan's Labyrinth, which is a classic film. I haven't reviewed for the podcast, but it's a phenomenal movie. But if you know Del Toro's work, he does work with darker themes. So this version of Pinocchio is definitely darker than you would expect for that story. It kind of really leans into the darker themes of the film. But with that, doing that, it really adds an emotional heft to it that I really appreciated. Very emotional. Like I said, he loses his son at the beginning. He's dealing with that grief as he's interacting with Pinocchio, who almost becomes a surrogate son to him. And as the movie evolves, that conflict there, that kind of brings back the grief of losing his son, but he's got something here that he can maybe hold on to as a replacement. All of that stuff is kind of mixed in there. There are some, even though with that dark themes, there's some great songs in the movie that are performed. There are not a lot of songs in there, but there's some in there, and they're very well done. They're very well placed as well throughout the movie. And like I said, there's an emotional heft to it that I really enjoyed. And what really struck me was the character of Pinocchio really engendered a lot of emotional response from me as a viewer of the movie. Fantastic voice performance, fantastic performance, because it really, as he's trying to navigate what he is, how he fits into the world, he wants to, make Geppetto happy, but there's the pressure of Geppetto wanting him to be like Carlo, his son that passed away, and that push and pull, and him navigating how to live in this world and what to do. And there's themes of, like I said, of loss, of going through the stages of grief, of coming to grips of losing someone, how to move forward, uh, being stuck in grief. All of that is really played out very well in this movie. And if you're wondering about Jiminy Cricket, in this film you have the great Ewan McGregor voicing Sebastian J. Cricket, who is the character in this film, he's very good. The voice work is very good there. He's kind of the comic relief, kind of the conscience of Pinocchio, trying to steer him in the right direction. So that character is great, and the voice work is great as well. The main voice of Geppetto is played by the actor who was actually in Harry Potter, and he's done other voice work, I think, for Guillermo del Toro's animated shows that he has on Netflix. So again, going into the technical wizardry of this, the movie is beautiful looking. Like stop action animation, if you go all the way back to like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, kind of those Rankin and Bass classic stop action animation Christmas. One of the things and part of its charm of those movies are that it's crude, in the sense that it's just it looks rudimentary, even though it's very difficult to do even back then. You have to move the character for each frame of film. So as I stated earlier, there was about 1,000 people that worked on this film, and it took them 3 years to do it. The stop action animation is stunning. The film looks stunning. Like it's unbelievable. I mean, they're using that technique, but it's so well done. It's a beautiful looking film. It's just beautiful. And I was amazed as I was watching through the whole running time of the movie. I was amazed by how the movie looked. It was phenomenally looking, and very, very impressive. So the movie is an hour and 56 minutes. Didn't feel it moved very quickly. Like I said, the movie is at times heavy, light, funny, serious. It goes through a whole different range of emotions. Like I said, if you're a fan of Guillermo del Toro's work, you'll see it all played out here. He tells stories about characters going through some dark stuff, and kind of, like I said, playing in that lane and leaning into the darkness of things that happen. So with this version of Pinocchio, it's definitely there, and it definitely helps it. Like I said, it was I didn't know what to expect when I was going to check it out. I had heard some really good reviews. I wasn't sure if I was going to even watch it, but I decided to go ahead and watch it and review it for the podcast. And I'll tell you, I'm glad I did. It's a fantastic film. I highly recommend it. What I will say, the movie is rated PG. So my only thing I will say is it's definitely not for little kids. So I wouldn't let a 4, 5, 6-year-old watch it. There's some darker themes in it. So I would probably maybe start, if I had maybe like an 8 or 9-year-old, I would maybe start letting them watch it. But really little kids, this is definitely not for them. I think some of the elements may scare them, and some of the elements they may not understand. But I think a little bit older kids will be fine with it. Like I said, it's rated PG, so I think that's an appropriate rating. Like I said, not for little kids, but younger kids can watch it. Probably, like I said, from like 8, 9, and up should be fine. But again, like I said, the movie is visually stunning. The voice talent is great. You've got Ewan McGregor, John Turturro, Ron Perlman, just great performances all around with all the characters. Christoph Waltz, as I mentioned earlier, fantastic. So like I said, I highly recommend Pinocchio. Like I said, you can see it now on Netflix. It was a film for Netflix. Like I said, I think I played in theaters for like a week or two, and now it's streaming on Netflix, so you can watch it now if you have Netflix. So again, Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, co-directed by Guillermo del Toro and Mark Gustafson. I'm going to go ahead and give Pinocchio 4.5 Van Goghs out of 5. So on that scale, I mean, it's a fantastic movie. It's a movie I would watch again. I think I'm interested to see how it does streaming-wise, but I know the critical response has been fantastic, and I can see why. It's a really excellent film. It's moving, it's funny, it deals with deeper issues, with grief, things like that, and it does it in a beautiful way, and it's beautifully rendered. So I highly recommend Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. Again, it's streaming on Netflix. My review of it is going to be 4.5 Van Goghs out of 5. So again, I want to thank everybody that's listened to the podcast. I know it's been a while since I've been on. It's been a couple of months. It's been kind of a crazy couple of months. So I'm glad to be back. and hopefully moving forward with more regular episodes. So I want to thank everybody that's stuck around and has listened to the show on the audio platforms or have watched it on YouTube, Facebook, and on Twitter. I appreciate all the views and I appreciate the listens. So thank you for that. If you want to reach the show, the email is bendyourearpodcast@gmail.com. One day I'll get that email right. bendyourearpodcast@gmail.com. And I encourage you to go to the website. Every episode is there from the beginning. The website is letmebendyyourear.com. And if you can do two things, if you're a regular listener to the podcast, and I would really appreciate it. As an independent podcaster, obviously, there's really no way to get the word out other than social media and word of mouth from people that listen and like the show. So if you follow the show on Twitter, the handle's @BendYourEarPod. If you see my post for any new shows, old shows, anything on there, please, if you can retweet those, get those out there for anyone that's looking for a new movie podcast to listen to or watch. Also, if you listen to this podcast primarily on any podcasting app, the show's available on most of them. You can get it on Amazon, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, CastBox, Amazon Music, pretty much anywhere. If you Google the show, Let Me Bend Your Ear podcast, it's pretty much on every podcatcher. So wherever you listen to the show, especially if it's on Google Podcasts or Apple Podcasts or Spotify, because the show is there as well, if you can rate and review it, that would be fantastic. If you give it a 5-star review, hopefully, that'd be great. And the reason for that is the more ratings and reviews any podcast can attain on a certain platform, the higher that show will pop in results if people are looking for a movie podcast. I know at the end of the year, people listen to their regular podcast and sometimes they run out and they're always looking for new things to listen to. And this show's developed a back catalog now, so I would love to get new listeners and viewers to the podcast. I can go back and listen, and they'll have a content for a while to keep them busy if they're out of podcasts to listen to, especially movie ones. So again, if you could do that, I'd really appreciate it. And again, if you want to email the show, the email is bendyourearpodcast@gmail.com. The website is letmebendyyourear.com. And again, I want to thank all the viewers and all the listeners to the podcast. Like I said, hopefully I'll be back more regularly. But again, to wrap it up here, I have rated and reviewed Pinocchio, directed by Guillermo del Toro. 4.5 Van Goghs out of 5. So definitely check it out. It's streaming on Netflix now. Take care, everyone, and have a fantastic holiday. See you soon.